Does CrossFit care at all about the age group and adaptive competitions? Let's get into it. Hey, before we get started, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you don't miss any content coming out here on the channel in the future. So today's topic came to me from a follower on Instagram, and I love it when you guys send me ideas because honestly, this one had not been on my radar. But an adaptive athlete reached out to me and he mentioned that he was annoyed, those are his words, that Wheelwad and Wadapalooza SoCal are competing on the same weekend, and he just couldn't understand how CrossFit could allow that to happen. And if I'm being honest, I initially dismissed him because Wadapalooza is not a CrossFit event. It's a functional fitness event, but it's not run by CrossFit. And so initially I thought, okay, just maybe bad timing. But then I started thinking about this and looking at it through a longer lens, and I did a little research. And what I came to find out that I had not really been thinking about is that actually both age group competitions, the Masters and the Teens, are on the same weekend, competing against each other at different locations. And then you've got Wheelwad going up against Wadapalooza on a different weekend. So essentially you have all three competitions that are intended to be the reward and the championship of those individual groups, competing for viewers, in some cases even against themselves. Now, what I don't want to do today is complain about what these three divisions are or are not getting in comparison to elite athletes. The sport of CrossFit is wildly different from elite athletes to these three divisions, and while Masters, Teens, and adaptive athletes are absolutely exceptional elite athletes in their own right, it's not really an even or a fair comparison from a sport perspective to compare them. With that said, if CrossFit wants to keep their word and turn these events into a reward and a championship experience for the athletes, and to make sure that they continue to grow, there's a few things that they're currently not doing that I think they're going to need to start doing, and I have some ideas on how we can fix that. Make sure you stick around to the end of this video to hear those ideas, and do me a favor, drop your ideas into the comments, because the more we share, the more people listen. So let's start back from the very beginning. So back in October, CrossFit headquarters issued a press release and a statement from Dave Castro regarding the age group and adaptive competitions. And in that statement, he said, CrossFit's excited to announce a season expansion that will help grow the CrossFit's championship competition and create new opportunities to shine a spotlight on athletes across all divisions. Masters athletes represent more than half of the CrossFit Open participants, and combined with the teens and adaptive divisions, these athletes sit at the core of the sport's continued growth. It's the right thing to do to reward each group with their own distinct championship event and expand our overall championship season. New partnerships with Wheelwad, Pit Teen Throwdowns, and Legends Championship will help dramatically increase the number of Masters and teenage athletes competing in the finals, nearly double the number of divisions for adaptive athletes, and provide a chance for CrossFit to evolve its competition model to make the CrossFit Games internationally scalable in the future. So those are all great things, right? Individual competitions, recognition, a distinct championship for each group to reward them, and a chance to help the division grow to make the competition scalable internationally. And you can't really argue with any of those points. And I think we all hope that all of that comes to fruition. The question begs now, though, if those are the goals and what CrossFit is looking to do long term, on the onset, what have they done? What have they missed, and what will they need to do to actually make this pull all the way through to success? I want to give them credit where credit's due, and I think a couple of things that they did well was, first of all, they partnered with established comps. Legends, Wheelwad, and Pit all put on fantastic individual competitions and will absolutely be terrific stewards of providing this reward model that Dave mentioned for the athletes that qualify to get there. I think that's a great thing. Also, all three of these competitions should provide a great experience for the athletes themselves. I think the risk of separating these three from the actual games or the elite games is that there was a community feeling or a festival feeling that you get at the games itself that gives an environment that's truly special and unique. And there's a fear that you would lose that by pulling them away from that. I think all three of these competitions should be able to provide that experience for the athletes. I also think that it will allow for better facilities, judging, scalability specific to each event. It's no surprise that the adaptive competition run by Willwad has far more requirements needed than a traditional comp. They'll need, more judges, special equipment, and, special needs to pull this off. And so I think it should allow for better competition for those adaptive athletes and clearly bring in a lot more competitors than they were able to do at the traditional CrossFit games. Now, what have they not done? We've said it from the onset, the scheduling's horrible. And I realize you only have so many weekends in a year, and you have to look for facilities and get volunteers, and everything that goes into it is very difficult. However, it still feels very rushed and poorly planned. If you look at the dates and times of how this rolled out, Wodapalooza announced their dates back in July of last year. CrossFit announced that they were making this change in October, and then announced the actual dates somewhere in January or February, I believe. So there was basically a 6-month effective window that should have been plenty of time to coordinate with all three events to pick better, separate, more effective dates for these competitions. Now, hopefully in the future, this won't be an issue, but it's certainly going to be an issue this year. Along those same lines, when you put the adaptive competition on the same weekend as Wodapalooza, it's a really hard sell. You've got multiple games champions competing at Wodapalooza, as well as fan favorites, and you're asking fans to make a choice against the athletes that they've grown to know and love over the years. It puts the adaptive contest at a pretty significant disadvantage. So the question now is, what are some things CrossFit can do to address this? What are the easy, inexpensive things CrossFit can do to address it? Well, first of all, I think number one, you have to have 3 separate weekends. And I know that seems obvious, but there's a couple of reasons why you need to do this and why it's critically important. First of all, if you have them on separate weekends, leadership can attend. Having leadership involved is critically important to this. In today's social media climate, the perception of involvement is often as important as actual involvement. And you need that show of support to reinforce to the community that CrossFit isn't taking these groups for granted and that they're highly valued. I can tell you through great experience, I've talked to many athletes, both at the adaptive and team levels, and even the masters, that have come away from these competitions from meeting Dave Castro or Don Fall or Boz or whoever may be involved in the games, and how much it means to them to know that their hard work is recognized. Second, when you have these events on the same weekend, hurts your ability to get it out to the masses. And so you need to put them on separate weekends so you can use all your media tools to your disposal. You could allow these individual competitions to use your Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the game site. They'd all be available that you could turn over to them for production purposes. And right now, when you think of this year, at a minimum, the masters and teens are going to be competing for space on those sites if you're allowing it. What's even worse is that the friction for customers to go find these sites is going to be really difficult this year. All 3 of those well-run competitions have their own media, but right now CrossFit dominates the media space, and everyone recognizes that going directly to the CrossFit Games YouTube is the fastest, easiest way to see competition news. And they're not going to get the opportunity unless you turn that over to them. Third, along the same lines of media, I believe CrossFit should offer media pass to literally anyone who requests it for all 3 of these events. And yes, that includes Andrew Hiller. Literally anyone that asks for it should get it, and here's why. CrossFit has a significant number of creators that will produce amazing work for you for little to nothing. All you need to give them is unlimited access and resources. It costs you nothing to do that. You get nothing but upside. You should also allow them to partner on your platforms. What that's going to do is incent them to give you the very best content, knowing it's going to be pushed out to a much greater audience than they're used to, growing their platform and helping yours. They'll be sharing interviews and contents with athletes leading up to these events, telling their stories, getting people invested, and getting more eyes on the prize. I would go as far as to say you might want to think about subsidizing some of them as well to give them a reason to show up in person for these events. And then last, CrossFit media needs to show up too. You have to tell the stories of these athletes, and here's why. Back to my original point, these comps are wildly different than they are for elite athletes. This is your core audience. Unlike the elites, these athletes actually work out in your gyms 5 to 6 days a week, by and large in affiliates only. I know some train at home, but they don't do training camps. They don't have a different coach for every aspect of the sport. They work out in our gyms, coached by our affiliate owners, coached by our everyday level one coaches, cheered on by our everyday athletes that are highly invested in their story. Their story is your story, and you should tell it. I really hope that CrossFit finds a moment to think about the long-term health of these divisions and what it can mean both for the brand and affiliates, what it can mean for the athletes, and the growth it can bring for all of us. If you guys have other ideas, I'd love to hear it. Drop it in the comment section. We'll see you soon.